Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you had a good lunch. The topics for the breakout sessions which will be held today evening have been put up on the back wall of the hall. Some papers have been left blank, so you can fill the topic of your choice if you have someone in mind. Please sign up for the sessions. They'll be held in the evening from 6 to 7:30. You are requested to sign up for the breakout groups. The topics have been put up on the back wall. Some chart papers have been left blank. You can, if you have a topic in mind, you could write the topic there. Hello everyone, welcome to the first session of the 6th National Conference on Social Entrepreneurship. This is the first official session of the conference, and the topic of the session is building self-reliant communities. Local self-reliance enables the community to own and maximize its human, material, and financial resources, and is a key to building a sustainable community. Moreover, such autonomy is also a prerequisite to equitable distribution of the benefits of these systems and ensures that the resources accrue to all community members. India offers many such models of developing self-reliant communities, and this session brings some of the entrepreneurs and development sector professionals to share their experiences in developing such communities. I would like to request the following to come to the stage, please. Dr. Joe Madiath, Executive Director, Brand Vikas. Chawla, co-founder of Tamarind Tree. Thekaekara, founder, Just Change India. Mr. Amitabh Ghosh, founder of Kalamandir. I request Neha to come and present the bouquet to everyone on the line. Mr. Amitabh Ghosh will be the moderator for this session. Commonly known as Amitabh Rao, Amitabh Ghosh is the founder of Jamshedpur-based NGO called Kalamandir, which aims to achieve social synergy and human harmony through arts and aesthetics. Kalamandir is a leading non-profit organization on handicraft initiatives, and Mr. Ghosh has been spearheading a silent journey to revive design art forms in ancient India and thereby help poor tribals to improve their economic and social conditions. He is also the first promoter of rural tourism in Chawla. Mr. Ghosh has been associated with Kalamandir for more than 16 years and has been actively involved in most of the socially relevant projects undertaken by XLRI. I now request him to please come to the dais and moderate the session.
Good afternoon. Madhukarji is giving me a task. These are two important tasks. after this sumptuous lunch, we have to keep you awake. Listen to us, number one, and also to meet the challenge, what Vasanti put before us. Because Madhukari said that there is no keynote address in the session, but all of us realized that what Vasanti said. Very typically Jharkhandi style, Vasanti started about talking a personal decision, what she wants to do, and then she goes back to convincing his family. It's most important in a village society. And then she said how she involved the entire community in action, because you heard her saying that the entire marriage was made possible because of the presence of the SHG group. And then the community, this SHG group, they convinced the villages, the village head and all. And we who all work in tribal areas, we know that the village head is a very, very important institution. And so is the Gram Samiti. And finally, with the support of the community, when she came back to our village due to some audition, she entered into a new life. And there she talked about the economic system. And what we'll talk about, my good friends Michelle, Joe, and Stan will talk about now is all about this thing. And it's a great thing that at the beginning we heard Vasanti, Parvati, Kenaram, and all to understand the basic things which happen in Jharkhand. While you are in Jamshedpur, many of you are in Jamshedpur several times, many are for the first time. But seeing Jamshedpur, you may not know what Jharkhand is. When you go beyond 30 kilometers from Jamshedpur, you start knowing what Jamshedpur, the Jharkhand is, and from where these people came to talk to you. You don't mind these kind of roads at all. Even those people who have come from Ranchi, they must have tasted some kind of road, but cannot imagine the condition of the road inside the village. And then water, not available. And of course, Kiloram that we was talking about natural resource, that is the only source of income other than Narega and contract labors. Because Jamshedpur and its surroundings have many mining and industrial organizations. So every day in the morning, early morning, you see thousands and thousands of tribals are coming by small vehicles, entering the city for their livelihood. That is the truth. And on this background, we are talking about building self-reliant communities. How do we do it? And for whom do we do it? With whom do we do it? What is the experience? Of course, Joe Madiath from Vikas is a big name. I was just telling him that whenever I visit Bhubaneswar for my other purpose, I'm a banker in Jira Bank. So whenever I go, my manager says, "Bhai Ahmedabad, आपको एक बार उनसे मिलना चाहिए गांव विकास भवन से." ठीक है मिलेंगे, लेकिन कभी नहीं हुआ. But this time I could meet him. And Joe is the executive director of Thekaekara, and is one of the largest NGO in Odisha. His contribution in relief work for the Bangladeshi refugees, and then to cyclone in Odisha. We have read in the newspapers, journals and all, and that was a tremendous work. But then he decided to stay back in Odisha and start this initiative. He is the founder of the Voluntary Association Network of India and the Odisha Development Action Forum. He currently serves on the governing board of several institutions, including CAPART, Society for Participatory Research in Asia, and PRIA and PESIX. So I would request Joe to begin today's session, and we all are here to hear from him. मार्शल साहब टाइम कितना रहेगा?
About 15-20 minutes.
15?
That way we'll have it more time for discussion and question answers.
Any moderator realize that there is always a super moderator. Here we have the super moderator to moderate the moderator. Friends, self-reliant communities. It almost sounds an impossibility. Self-reliant communities. But how do we even reach a semblance of self-reliant communities? I think when you speak about communities, we speak about total communities. Where there is total inclusion, where there is no exclusion whatsoever. In India, especially in our villages, we have practiced exclusion forever. Exclusion of women in general, exclusion of the scheduled caste, exclusion of the scheduled tribes, exclusion of the poor, exclusion of categories like widows. Widows were at one time thought to be so bad for a society that they would rather be burned at the funeral pyre of their husbands. So, if you look at it, the bane of our society is exclusion. And if you want to have self-reliant communities, then this has to give place to an inclusive community. Easier said than done. I think for an inclusive community, communities will have to go through an experiential learning of inclusion. Without an experiential learning of inclusion, these centuries of exclusion will bring in a sort of mentality where the excluded will feel that it is our fate. The next birth, I will be born as a Brahmin and I can exclude the others. Or let's hope that next birth, I will not be born as a woman, but as a man, so that I could exclude the men. And they excluded, and the excluding people, those who exclude the others, they feel it is God-given right. If God did not give this, if did not make me a Brahmin or a Kshatriya, why am I here? So it is God's will that I am born into a higher caste, so that I can throw around others and show of my superiority. This, coupled with the dominant thinking, our academic institutions, our journalists, our bureaucrats, politicians, and anybody who has power, they today believe that poor people deserve poor solutions. The very poor deserve pathetic solutions. And this, coupled with the thinking that the cheapest is the most economical. It's a heady, very heady cocktail. And people are under the influence of this cocktail, at least those who are preaching to us. A self-reliant community has to really question this thinking. It has to question whether one teacher who most often does not come to the school for 5 classes, as it is in the custom in Orissa, will in any way make the children of the poor or the villagers in a position to compete with the so-called mainstream, that they would never be able to even see the gains of an institution like XLRI. Yeah, if my own field, water and sanitation, when a government officer tells you that actually, if you have got a handball, a tubel for 500 families in a habitation, that's quite okay. If a woman in summer month will spend anything between 4 to 7 hours to bring water, that's okay. Applaud. What are these women what will these women otherwise do? And the pity is that the communities, the people in villages, because we are in awe of the sections that preach to us that you need only an inferior thing, we are in awe of them, and somehow we, to a great extent, accept it. And this, I think, is the biggest deterrent, the biggest block that stands in our way to self-reliant communities. I go to my own organization, where we believe we are on the path of building self-reliant communities. How do we start? How do we go? How do we work with the people? We believe that water and sanitation can build an enabling environment to build self-reliant communities. Because we can argue without any doubt that the defecation habit of even one family in a village of 100 families can defile the water of the entire community. So it is needed that everyone in the community, every family in the community has a toilet. We have been able to also convince the government, both at the center and the state, that it is not only the privileged and the rich in the cities who should have running water. Today, now 12th 5-year plan, running water is something which has been enshrined in the 12th 5-year plan as a right, almost a right for every family, and there is budgetary provision for that. So, is everywhere everywhere we take up this program, first of all, it has to be sustainable. So what do we say? 1,000 rupees on an average, every family has to put forward into a corpus fund. On an average, the poor giving less and the better off giving more, but the poorest widow in that village also giving at least 50 rupees, the others making up the rest. Then all the unskilled labor in that village is brought under skill development They learn how to be masons, how to be plumbers, how to be stone dressers, how to be wire benders, how to be painters. And then they construct a toilet and a bathing room. We believe that a bathing room is as important in rural areas as a toilet because of the requirement of privacy for women. Toilet and a bathing room is constructed. We also believe if we are not willing to use it, don't facilitate the building of such a facility. So it is only a toilet and a bathing room which I would be willing to use. We do not believe that there should be a second class or a third class type of toilet. That should be for the poor. A toilet and bathing room is built. From a safe source, water is pumped up or brought by gravity to a reservoir, overhead water tank, an elevated reservoir. From there, every family gets 3 tanks. A toilet, one in the toilet, one in the bathing room, one in the kitchen, or just outside the kitchen, as the woman decided. No woman in these villages, and we have now completed this in 1063 villages, need to take more than 5 steps to get her glass of water. Nobody needs to store water so that it can be defined. This is on a par with cities. And there can be pressure built up within the village because it's 100%. There's nobody. So there are very strict norms enforced by the community that nobody can defecate outside. It's a huge fine. And half the fine goes to the people who catch somebody defecating outside. So as soon as, for example, the toilets are completed and water flows into the toilets, there are cases where people climb up the top of the trees to see who is defecating in the open because it may be 100 rupees fine and 50 rupees will go to his pocket. So it's quite an income generating program. So then there are, these people have defecated in the open, exposing the face and hiding the face. And with the wind on their sails, they have been sitting for generations out there. And now, asking them to go all of a sudden to a room and shut the door and do the job there, some of them find it very difficult. So they go out again, but then because it is 100%, the village can bring in pressure. If anybody keeps the toilet dirty, there is a group which is going around and finding them if they, and also cleaning if necessary, but for cleaning it, there's a hefty fine. So slowly the community comes up. The poorest scheduled caste or scheduled tribe woman of that village has the same type of toilet, bathing room, and 3 taps, and 24 hours water supply, portable water supply, as the highest Brahmin woman of that village. Well, so this is an experiential learning, what I said about experience. They go through an experience, they have never thought that this could be possible, that they could be in any way equal to the higher class, the richer people. But when they see this happening, somehow the adrenaline pumps into their veins and they begin to say, "Hum kisi se kam nahi." And that feeling of "Hum kisi se kam nahi" is the game changer. That changes their life. That put together in a total quantum of the whole village, they work towards self-reliant and dynamic communities. And this is an example. And from here, when people see that inclusion has done wonders for their village, for their own self-respect, and that it has not done any harm, so they begin to take steps from their livelihood in, and a person's, I said the whole thing is totally sustainable. Or in each village, every family has a water meter. They pay as per the volume of water they consume. So volumetric metering of water, and they pay. These are the only 1063 villages are the only villages in Odisha which pays for water. All the rest is paid by the government. But then they have 24 hours water supply. They are proud. They are ready to pay because they are the managers. They want to be self-reliant. They want to communities. They want to be part of communities that matter. Thank you very much. Should I take some questions? Or if there are any. And always.
Thanks for
Yeah.
There won't be chance to ask
Joe is a good finisher, very timely finisher obviously. Excellent. I request Mr. Chawla, co-founder and trustee of Common Dreams, to speak about. चलते चलते मैं आपको इंट्रोड्यूस कर देता हूँ। Mr. Chawla, along with her husband, Hanuman Babu, founded Common Tree, located in Dahanu, Maharashtra. Common Tree work on developmental and environmental issues in Ghana and is based on a threefold approach for an integrated development: education, environment protection, and community media. बाकी सारे चीज आपका पास में आते हैं. So over to Misha and Common Tree.
Yeah, hello everyone. At the outset, I'd like to first say that Joe has covered a very critical point in this discussion on building self-reliant communities. The point being that India is a caste, class, gender divided society, and building a society or building self-reliant communities in a society like this is a huge project, whether it's a social, political, economic, or cultural project. And he's covered many of the points in that. However, I'd like this presentation to be slightly bit more specific and maybe for young people to not feel that building self-reliant communities is very difficult and complex and impossible. So just to say that we all understand how complex and difficult it is and how the task is both political, economic, social, cultural, and so on and so forth. Self-reliance is not a new concept. We've been hearing about it since Gandhiji's time. We've talked about decentralized rural communities that are self-reliant. However, it seems that since independence to now, something has gone terribly wrong. The development programs promoted by the Indian government in any sector, if you look today, whether it's health, education, microfinance, agriculture, local governance, are either not reaching the people, or if they're reaching, are out of context, irrelevant in terms of the content or the methodology. All social sectors need to be in a mess. The development sector in the last several years has been speaking the notion and has been espousing the value of self-reliance. If you look slightly more deeply, it seems notional. Notional for three reasons. One reason why development sector work is not building self-reliant communities is because it's backed by huge philanthropic resources. And we must be honest enough here to admit that that is a huge flaw in the entire effort. Secondly, the values of the development sector. One is target-orientedness, scalability, and time. These are three factors which actually are an antithesis to building a self-reliant community. You become target-driven, you want to scale up, and you have a time frame in which you want to show these goals. I don't think that you can do that and achieve self-reliability in community. This is something that we all need to look at in the fields that we are in. And it may not go down well with many people here, but that is actually the truth, and is actually stopping the building of self-reliant community. I'd like to focus on only one aspect of building self-reliant communities, which is ownership. And I'd like to discuss in the next in the presentation how we're looking primarily at how ownership can build self-reliability. Where most of us get lost is in access, right? We all think that access is more important, access to water, access to sanitation, access to digital education. And we get lost in then who and how do we make people own this. A couple of thoughts, and a lot of our work is in technology, so the presentation might tilt more on giving examples in media, technology, and knowledge. And I think there are other people to discuss on other issues. People talk about a mobile revolution in India. Everyone says that the mobile phone has reached every nook and corner of this country. But if you delve slightly deeply into spectrum politics in the country today, you realize that all we've managed to do is create a mass base of consumers who can answer a phone. Is there any community who can think of setting up their own GSM network in their own area? Can we take these airwaves for ourselves? Can we build our own GSM network? Similarly, you stretch the argument to television. The entire spectrum is today corporate owned. Can any community set up a community TV for themselves? So when we talk about self-reliability, we need to decide what we're talking about. Are we talking about access to digital technology? So you have very wonderful groups and they're all friends, building amazing digital content. I think these cameras to young people today, you teach them how to shoot, you collect oral history, you collect oral culture, and you have all this mass of digital content, and then what do you do with it? You upload it on YouTube. YouTube is a corporate control server owned by Google. All your data is sitting there with Google, right? Can we not think of having community-owned servers that people are self-reliant in terms of where their content is hosted, how it is being transferred, and where it goes? So sometimes I think we become users. We make the community also users rather than producers, owners, or creators of whatever it is that they're doing, whether it's in technology, whether it's in water and sanitation, or in any area. So keeping this in mind, I'd like to share some of our experiences at building ownership, and this is a task which will go on for several generations, so we don't claim any great results. But philosophically, it's very hard to work on full ownership and to actually say that okay, this is community owned. Most groups that claim community ownership, need to really define what this ownership is. So there are just a few slides, and it's not just complimentary. Actually, I'd like to share the work of 3 groups, and I'd like to start with Nomad. Just some images, there's no content. Nomad is a group that emerged in the early 2000s, when finally the government of India decided that the airwaves need not be their personal property. So till about 2006, no community, no person in India could take the airwaves and take the airwaves and start their own radio station. A lot of groups in the country campaigned. They said the airwaves must belong to the public. The public should be able to voice their songs, their culture, their news, and airwaves are not the property of a government to sell and to auction. With the opening up of the airwaves, Nomad is a small group of community and technology enthusiasts. We made a do-it-yourself FM transmitter, and the group believes in open source technology and open source hardware. All our work is in the open source field, and this transmitter was taken to the government and said that the community built transmitter, and we'd like other community members to also make it and use it. You'd be surprised to know that because All India Radio has been the only controlling radio agency in this country, there are only 2 public sector companies even today in India who produce transmitters, Bevel and Bharat Electronics. And the government of India looked at us as if we were crazy, that how can you, sitting in some remote part of India without laboratory facilities, without technicians, and without any proper testing here, build a radio frequency transmitter, an RF transmitter. The RF transmitter is built by a team of not of engineers, but of people who just have learned on the job and have learned through collaborating with other people across. Somehow, we convinced the Indian government to let a DIY transmitter be allowed in the public domain. The designs of the transmitter are open. The philosophy is that anyone can build their own transmitter. However, the government of India has certain restrictions. So we put the transmitter to certain international tests, and it passed those tests. And today we have about 3 dozen, almost 35 to 36 radio stations across the country that use the Nomad transmitter. The spirit of the transmitter, and this is where the ownership comes in, is that we are not a service provider group saying that this is our transmitter, please use it, and whenever it's faulty and has a problem, we will come and repair it. The idea is that if you're setting up a radio station, you're very happy being behind the mic and singing your songs, and you think that technology is his job or his job, and it's not my job. And no one is working at separating the distinction between content and technology, which most development groups and the government of India has, saying that if you are a producer of a television program, you also need of a radio program, you also need to be the producer of the technology behind it. Because that will make you the full owner of the system. Today, private radio stations across the country import RF equipment because there is no knowledge, no talent, and no innovation happening in the country to develop their own transmitters. Our experience with working with development groups, because as per the community radio policy, only an NGO is allowed to apply for a radio license, is that they are as shy and as scared and have what we call a technophobia, and again segregate that we are into content, we make the health program, and technology is work. And this is a big problem with the entire society, where we're segregating what is now becoming a critical part of our lives, whether you look at your usage of the internet, the laptop you buy, and down across. Self-reliant communities can be applicable to you and me as well. Along with the FM transmitter, we also push and promote open source technology. So this is all open source software, not proprietarily owned by Bill Gates or by Apple or by XYZ company. We promote software that are built by a community of collaborators globally, where knowledge is collaboratively shared, codecs are open, and anyone can use it, build it, further build on it, and use it. This is an open source movement, and I really encourage many young people to please look at it before just installing, whatever software you're currently getting in the market. Again, we find most groups not willing to take this ownership of saying that, okay, we want to be self-reliant in the software we use. We want to use the software that is built globally by young people like you and not by some corporation sitting there. And that software can then be edited and used. And even if you're just a user, it's still developed, it is in the open source space. And open source, just to, if some of you are interested, is free as in freedom and not free as in money. So you're basically making community self-reliant because the code is free. So this is the mobile transmitter. Along with this, we train communities to actually build their own transmitter. But as I said, very cynically, that most people still would like us to be service providers, and they don't want to, engage with the technology side. We also, along with this, we also build our own broadcast units, and again encourage communities to assemble computers themselves, to install hardware and software themselves. So this is one attempt, and again where we come. So if you build something yourself with your own hands, it's very likely that you will happily own it, and your community will also feel that the radio station is entirely yours. We also built the antenna along with it. We call it a home fuse antenna. Yeah, so that was the work of NOMAD, which is sort of pan-Indian and works all over India. The other organization that I'd like to talk about, and that where we are again trying to build in this component of ownership. We run a small school in Dahanu, which is about 200 kilometers from Mumbai. It's a tribal area, and there seemed to be a need to set up an English medium school for the local tribal children. We have 150 children today, and it seems that you can go on for 2 generations educating maybe 100, 200, 500,000 children, and at least in my lifetime, maybe I would achieve that much. However, what we feel now is that again technology can really open up and really build equity, and also completely turn the way education has been in this country. We're looking at building a community which is self-reliant on education, because today the things that are happening in education and technology are simply fantastic. So currently we're promoting an idea where all of the content of the education is hosted on a server in the school. A lot of the content through other projects can also be hosted on these servers which are at school. And then the entire village gets linked through wireless mesh networking. It's basically a Wi-Fi which you have here, but it's a community-based low-cost Wi-Fi where each unit in the village who hosts the router becomes a critical part of that of that organic, network. And whatever content is available in the school gets extended to the homes. At the end of the day, a physical school has a limitation. You can, as I said, have 100, 200, 500,000, 2,000 children in a physical space. But with technology, you can look at reaching out to much larger communities in a shorter span of time. The reason to use the wireless mesh networking is again that it's low cost, it's dependent on community, and it works only if there's community support, because each house will then have to have a router. So Tamil is piloting this project currently. Tamil charges a small fee to run the school, and we try very hard not to take any philanthropic money. We pass on as much of cost that we can to the community. So in the wireless project, it's very easy to call up somebody and say, I want 10 laptops for the school. But in our attempt at self-reliance and ownership, we don't do that. We have told the community that whatever money you save on the school, you need to buy a digital device, and we configure all those digital devices on an open source software. Our entire school is an open source. No child in the school has ever seen a Windows or an Apple machine, and we're very proud. It's a political statement we make. And the wireless mesh, some people are laughing when you see they're hiding the Apple laptops. And so it's a very big statement actually, and it's, this is again, I'm reiterating because these topics don't get covered in conferences like people. Most groups doing development work don't consider this as part of the change process, and we like as far as possible to push it because we work extensively on it on a daily basis. We like to share the information. So there is a global movement where there are open source tools to digitize curriculum, and there is something called Moodle, if you're interested. It basically the way technology and the internet is going, there is huge scope for democratization and there is huge scope for self-reliance. So the vision is that if the wireless mesh network reaches out to the villages, the child becomes self-reliant to learn from a set of resources that is initially put up for him because he's young or she's young. But as he or she grows up, the community becomes self-reliant in accessing the server that we have put up. We are also consciously not wanting to put the internet on this Wi-Fi network that we are building. Purely because we don't think that the role here is to just become internet service providers. And this is again something that we say that it's not about access, right? You can give access today to many villages. You can give media access. But how do you get a village or a community to be accountable, to own the network that they install? The only way you can do that is that if there is some sort of a philosophical agreement that yes, this is what we need and this is what we want. So it's a very small, very slow and extremely long drawn process which cannot be target oriented and definitely cannot be time oriented. So that's, I'll give you a very brief way. We're running the wireless mesh networking on a 2.4 gigahertz in case anyone is interested. Just some visuals. We also, again, in our attempt to just quickly run through this, in our attempt to build some sort of self-reliance, we run an oral history project where tribal youth are trained to collect their own history. Initially, the project started with a lot of folklore and mythology and that kind of stuff, but over time we realized that Salvador history and history from below is never really recorded. Most of the history of the region, most of our work has come either from the British or from academicians who went into the area and wrote about these people. So what tends to happen is that a reflected identity is also developed. You have a sense of an identity based on what people have written about you. You don't have an identity of yourself based on your own story. So the project became an oral history project where we struggled with technology, where we refused to use proprietary technology, even Sony cameras we rejected, because we thought that makes us dependent on the community because you have to use the software that Sony gave. So we worked extensively on researching what are the open source video editing tools, what are the open source audio editing tools, and we have one or two videos uploaded on YouTube because we are also victims of the same system. But we have tried to generate our own community servers which will run on this wireless mesh. And then the students and the children and adults in the community can watch these videos and upload and reload just like we would use the internet. So this is a small initiative which is going on. Yeah, as I said, we built our own antennas, and we trained a couple of tribal youth to configure these antennas both for the wireless mesh and for the community radio project. The third initiative, which is fairly new, is that since we want to ensure that we are self-reliant as a school and as an institution, we got all the parents of the children of the school to become a small collective, and we procure from them either traditional foods that have been forgotten or fresh vegetables that we are able to sell locally. It's a very small initiative. One output of that initiative, we run an online e-commerce model going on Untitled because the internet space is now open, so even in a remote area you can sit, configure an entire system and sell online. So just 2 slides for that. Yeah, this is just a visual thing. So I think at the bottom line, I don't know if the message has been conveyed that working on ownership and not just access is critical to building self-reliant communities. If we keep that in mind as we go along, it's it will take a long time, but at least we're working in the right direction. The temptations to get in, the temptations against this are easy financial resources. This tendency of wanting to sort of scale up, and of being result oriented. I'm repeating myself, but I think this is a problem in the system where you are actually an anti-reliability. The other important aspect, as I mentioned, is that self-reliability needs to be all through and through, not just in some aspects where you are not the producer of what you're doing, or you are not sort of the user. This, the intention, I think, behind sharing some of this work is to show how we are envisaging how a self-reliant community can be. Yeah.
So, thank you, Michelle, taking us all the NGO workers to the great world of modern environment. Next, I will invite Stan Thekaekara. Stan first became involved in social activism with the National Student Movement in India. We share the platform. Thank you. And he went on to live in a tribal village in Bihar for a number of years, and I came from there. Subsequently, founded a number of grassroots NGO in various parts of India that I did not do. And in 1986, he and his wife Mary co-founded Accord and has spent the past 20 years mobilizing the Adivasis of Nilgiri hills of Tamil Nadu in South India to fight for their social, political, and human rights. So Jharkhand, Odisha, Maharashtra, and then to Tamil Nadu. Welcome, sir. He currently works as a director of Just Change. I think he wants to speak about his work.
It's a nightmare of any speaker to speak in the afternoon after I eat lunch. And then to speak after 3 speakers is even bigger nightmare. But anyway, we take up the challenge. And I just want to begin first by saying that I was here last year for the same conference. And then I spoke more about Just Change. Today I will be speaking about something else, which is a cause which preceded Just Change. I will touch on Just Change. And one interesting thing I noticed between last year's conference and this year's conference is that there's been a lot of development in the organization. So I want to congratulate the young students. I mean, Madhukar doesn't need to be congratulated, of course, as a given. But the young students who have been behind the organization of this, I've seen a lot of development. So congratulations. How self-reliant you are, I don't know, but you are developed. So that's a good sign. But before launching into telling you about Accord and the whole Guru initiative and the journey towards self-reliance, I want to first set a framework so that you understand where we are coming from. So if I were to ask you, do you think India is a developed country or developing country or underdeveloped country? What do you think? And if I were to ask you which is the most developed country in the world, which would you think? Which do you think is the most developed country in the world? USA. Which is the most underdeveloped or least developed country in the world or a region in the world? Sub-Saharan Africa, parts of South America and all that. Now you have betrayed what your understanding of development is. When we talk about development, the paradigm or the model that you have is USA. Because that's the benchmark. I don't have figures with me, I don't carry them in my head. But you are all good at Google, those of you who have your smartphones can Google it now. And you will find that the most unsustainable economy is that of the US. Okay, their consumerism is at its highest. The carbon footprint of one individual in the US is equal to the carbon footprints of thousands of people of Sub-Saharan Africa. And yet, the model that we are all talking about, the path that we are on, the journey we are on, is towards this development. So when we use the word sustainable development, and when our definition of development is the US as the benchmark, we must realize that the word sustainable development is an oxymoron, it's a contradiction. Because this model of development is not sustainable at all. You can fool yourself and say, oh, I did something and we are financing it ourselves, we are not dependent on funding, or we are using bamboo and we are green, and or we are using recycled paper, so we are sustainable. Nonsense. Absolute nonsense. Because your model and your paradigm is based on something that is unsustainable. And the entire economy that we are working on is an economy that's based on this model, which believes in growth. You can't have a capitalist economy without growth. There has to be growth. And you see it every day in the papers. Chidambaram is saying, yes, 8% growth is achievable. We take great pride in growth. What is this growth that we are talking about? It's consuming all the earth's resources, gobbling it up, destroying it, and we still call it development. So we are listening to the 5 people this morning. I was specifically taken by the young man, I think his name was Puraspati, if I got the name right, and my Hindi is very limited, so I couldn't understand everything that he said. But the heart of what he said was they wanted control of the natural resources. And your entire development model is based on exploiting natural resources. And I find it very interesting that the word used boldly and proudly use the word exploiting. We all come, Joe, myself, all of us come from this background where the word exploitation is a very bad word. We used to talk about exploitative Marwaris and exploitative traders and exploitative money lenders, and exploitation was seen as a bad thing. But today, exploitation of natural resources is seen as a good thing. And we want it, and this is our model of development. So I want to talk about the work that we're doing not from a development perspective. Because I think the problem of the NGO sector, whatever you call it, NGO sector, voluntary sector, whatever name you now, this entrepreneurship sector, whatever name you want to call it, the problem is that we all, especially in the last 15, 20 years, have taken on a development perspective and given up the social justice perspective with which many of us started in the 70s. So social justice is no longer a cool word. When we started, activism and social justice that was it. You're a cool guy if you're working for social justice. Then after a few years, late 80s, mid 80s, late 80s, 90s, we were no longer cool to stop our socialists. So we all called ourselves development professionals. Or we became development professionals. That became the cool thing. Or we work in development sector, cool. Then afterwards in 2000, in the new millennium, development also became uncool. No social entrepreneurship. So both of us, we follow the same path. We also put them back social entrepreneurship. This whole sector was social entrepreneurship. We got some award from this thing for us being a social entrepreneur. So we put that back also. Now we are good. Yeah, social entrepreneur, cool. But the political perspective, where we talk about injustice, that is something we tend to forget about. And over the years, we have forgotten about. So even the 5 people who are talking today, if you dig beyond what they said, go a little deeper, I felt that they were asked a loaded question. What do you understand about development? Ask them what they understand about injustice. What is the injustice they have suffered? And they all touched upon it. The women talked about the injustice they have suffered as women. The young man talked about the injustice he has suffered about his natural resources and how they have tried to protect it. You have communities that have become vulnerable, that have become dependent because of social injustices, where other more powerful communities keep them where they are. And if we come in as a new player and just shift the dependency from the local landlord, or as has happened in the last few years, we shifted the dependency from the local money lender to the microfinance institution. We are not changing anything. We are still keeping them vulnerable. We are still keeping them open to exploitation. I found it very interesting that this young man talked about Chiranji. I don't know, many of you might know about it. It grows a lot in the hills of Jharkhand, in the forests of Jharkhand. And when I was here in 74, in the 70s, this Chiranji used to be collected by our tribals from the forest. And actually it was a community activity. The whole village, especially children, would go, climb the trees, shake the trees, the fruit would fall. Whole day the children are eating it, the flesh. Then they get the nut. Then that's broken open and the seed is sold. It was sold in Jharkhand. I don't know what the system is now. But in those days that was part of Bihar. It was sold for salt. 1 kilo of Chiranji seed used to get 20 kgs of salt. So that is how the tribal communities in this area got their year's supply of salt. And all the Adivasis used to laugh at these bhikkhus. What an idiot he is, it's growing free in the forest and he gives me 20 times of that in salt. And they used to think that these traders were mad. So I was a little curious, I tried to find out what this seed is used for. And I tracked it down to the markets in Bombay and Gujarat and Nagpur also. Where in those days, in 74, when salt was 40 paisa a kg, which means 20 kgs of salt cost 5 rupees. This seed, in the lowest form, that is broken, very bad quality, was a minimum price of 80 rupees and went up to as high as 400 rupees in those days. And today he said that it's still 400 rupees, 250. Yeah, in those days we found in Bombay and the whole seed, good quality, was selling from anything from 300 to 400 rupees, for which they got 5 rupees. Is this justice or is this injustice? And so, we have to look at ourselves and realize that we are all part of the problem. We try to con ourselves into believing we are the solution, but we are part of the problem. So we come from a background, many of us from the 70s, and Amita, all of us, we come from a background, and this is something everybody touched on today, including Michelle. We come from a background where we are looking not at development, but we are looking at unequal power relationships. So before I move on to the thing, I want to pick up 2 things that Joe and Michelle said, and I want to hold on to it while I'm speaking, and keep that at the back of your mind. Joe's signature line, which he says in many conferences, which all of us happily quote him and sometimes steal that line from him, about poor solutions for poor people. That's, that's our attitude. Let's face it. We are going to offer solutions as social entrepreneurs, which are not solutions we ourselves are going to use. And the second important thing is the question of ownership that Michelle talked about. There's two concepts I want to hold on to while I am speaking. So, we talk about a bottom-up approach. So that is what I was asked to speak about. Talking about what we have done as a bottom-up approach. I have a problem with that itself. See, my problem is I'm a literature student, so words mean a lot to me. The moment somebody comes and tells me, oh, you've taken up a fantastic bottom-up approach, that upsets me. Because what it means is that you believe these people are at the bottom. So the moment we talk about a top-down approach or a bottom-up approach, we are betraying our acceptance of this is the top and that is the bottom. So this is not a bottom-up approach, this is a community-centric approach or a social justice approach. So what we like to look at it is not a development perspective, but a social justice perspective. So let me see if I can make this work. Yes, I actually can. So, as I said, I'm asked, Madhukar asked me to just talk a little bit about Akkord's work, which is a 30-year journey, and I have to do this in 15 minutes. Bit of a challenge. Actually, it's a 40-year journey because I started in India in 74. But anyway, talking about Accord, started in 1985. Our starting point, and Michelle and I were just talking about this earlier, that they have come in with institutions and organizations and various solutions. As we started with communities. We started, I mean, we also worked with communities, but we started with no intention of any developmental intervention. Our only intention was to mobilize the community to fight for their rights. That was our only intention. It was a single point agenda,